All right, strap in, everybody. We are about to take a deep dive that'll really get those brain cells firing.
Oh, yeah.
You guys sent in this incredible conversation between J. Krishnamurti, David Bohm, and Dr. Parchure.
I know this one.
And let me tell you, these three really don't pull any punches when it comes to exploring truth and reality.
No, they don't.
We've got ourselves a spiritual teacher,
Huh.
a renowned physicist,
Okay.
and a Sanskrit scholar, all coming together to grapple with these big questions.
That's a fascinating combination right there.
It's a total dream team for a deep dive.
It is.
And what really strikes me
Yeah.
is how they go beyond just like defining terms. We're not just getting a philosophy lecture here.
Right.
They're really digging into how we see the world, how we perceive things, and how that all connects to the actual nature of truth.
Yeah.
And Krishnamurti,
Yeah.
he just jumps right in with this bold statement. He says, whatever our thoughts latch onto, whether it's rational, completely off base, it doesn't matter, that becomes our reality. But, and here's where things get really interesting, he insists that this reality we build in our minds
Yeah.
is totally separate from actual truth.
Yes. That's such a crucial point. It's not just semantics. It's about understanding that there's a difference between the world as we experience it and truth in its pure form.
Absolutely. And it's where Dr. Parchure brings in those Sanskrit terms,
Oh, yes.
Maya and
With
Satyam.
representing illusion and truth,
Right.
respectively.
Exactly. So Maya is this veil, this illusion that distorts our perception.
Right. It's like we're looking through a warped lens, mistaking the distorted image for the real thing.
It's almost like we're walking around in this hall of mirrors,
Yeah.
mistaking the reflections for the genuine article.
Yeah. And that's what keeps us from seeing Satyam, that pure, unconditioned truth.
Okay, so we've got this idea that truth exists outside of, beyond our constructed reality. But then they bring in this other concept, fact.
Ooh, this is where it gets good. They dive into this really fascinating question of whether a fact is the same thing as truth.
They use a powerful example too, violence. So someone hitting another person, that's a fact, right?
It happened, observable.
It happened, it's observable.
But is violence, the act itself, inherently true?
Right.
Or, and here's the kicker,
Yeah.
does the truth lie in understanding the deeper causes, the context, the consequences of that violent act?
That really flips the script, doesn't it?
It does.
It makes you think beyond the surface level.
Definitely. They're pushing us to go beyond just observing what happens and dig into the why and how, the meaning behind the actions.
Absolutely.
And it gets even deeper when they bring up this idea of a holy person.
Oh yeah, this part was fast.
Someone who is, totally whole, rational, unfragmented.
Could such a person actually be truth itself?
It's a question they wrestle with for a bit.
Yeah.
Bohm suggests that they're more like of the truth.
Yeah.
Like, imagine a drop of water taken from the ocean. The drop embodies the essence of the ocean. But it's not the whole ocean.
It's a part of it, it reflects it,
Exactly.
but it's not the entire thing.
Right. So even a holy person, with all their wisdom and insight,
Yeah.
still has limitations.
And then they bring in this other counterpoint, the vastness of nature.
Oh, this is where it gets really mind-blowing.
I know, right?
They argue that truth, real truth, has to encompass everything.
Including all the stuff we just can't wrap our human brains around.
Exactly. The natural world operates largely outside of human control or understanding.
So even a holy person's knowledge, however vast,
yeah,
is still just a tiny sliver
it is
of the whole truth.
Right. And this leads them to another massive point.
Okay, hit me with it.
The role of knowledge itself.
You mean all that stuff we spend our lives accumulating?
Exactly. We strive for knowledge, we build our realities around it.
Right.
But they make a really provocative argument.
What's that?
They say that knowledge doesn't equal truth.
Whoa, hold on.
They're saying that knowledge is inherently limited.
Okay.
It's bound by time, by our human perspective.
So that kind of throws a wrench into things, doesn't it?
It does, because if knowledge isn't the key, how do we unlock the door to truth?
Right. Is there a path, a method, some secret formula
Right.
to break free from our limited reality and experience something deeper?
That is the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is.
And both Krishnamurti and Bohm, they seem to agree there's no straightforward path, no guarantees. You can't just, will yourself to truth or read it in a textbook.
Okay, so no shortcuts then.
Nope.
But Bohm, he throws out this really interesting idea. He says, a key lies in understanding how our own consciousness distorts reality.
Oh, yeah.
He compares it to looking in a funhouse mirror. Everything is reflected back in this warped, exaggerated way.
Right. So our perception isn't giving us an accurate representation of reality.
Exactly.
It's like our minds are adding all these layers of interpretation and judgment, creating a distorted image.
So it's not that truth is hidden somewhere. It's that we're kind of blinded by our own perceptions.
Yeah. And he goes on to introduce this idea of energy.
Okay. I'm intrigued. What kind of energy are we talking about here?
He's not talking about physical energy, but mental energy. The kind that's generated by all our conflicting desires, our doubts, our fears.
Oh, I know that energy all too well.
Right.
And according to Bohm, that energy is what keeps us fixated on this illusion, this distorted view of reality.
See, exactly. It's like we're feeding this monster
Yeah.
that keeps us trapped in a cycle of confusion and suffering.
So the question is,
Yes.
how do we break free?
Well, that's where their conversation takes an even deeper turn, and where this idea of seeing, really seeing, becomes super important.
Ooh, that sounds like a great place to pause for a moment. We've already covered so much ground,
I know, right?
and it seems like there's even more to uncover in this deep dive into truth and reality.
Okay, so we've kind of laid out this idea
Yeah.
that truth is this unconditioned state. Like it exists outside of our little made-up realities, right?
Right, but that's kind of where I get tripped up. Like, it's easy to talk about these abstract ideas, but how do we actually bridge that gap?
Yeah.
How do we take these concepts of, like, Maya and seeing and actually apply them to our lives?
That's the key question, right?
It is. How do we actually start to see through that illusion? To experience satyam in a way that feels, real and tangible.
Well, one thing they emphasize is it's not about like achieving some special state of consciousness
Okay.
or following some rigid set of rules.
So it's not like a checklist we can just tick off.
No, not at all. It's more about cultivating a certain quality of attention,
Okay.
a willingness to observe our experiences without immediately slapping a judgment on them.
So instead of constantly trying to, like, define truth,
Right.
we need to learn to just be present with what is.
Exactly. Just observe those thoughts and feelings as they arise without getting swept away by them.
That makes me think about how often I try to, like, categorize everything, put things into neat little boxes,
Yeah.
label them as good or bad, right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
What if I just allowed myself to experience things as they are without those filters?
That's a perfect example.
Yeah.
They suggest that this kind of open, receptive awareness, it's essential for allowing truth to reveal itself.
So it's about creating space for something new to emerge
Exactly.
by letting go of our old fixed perspectives.
Yes. And that can be really challenging because it requires us to become comfortable with uncertainty.
Yeah, that's the part I struggle with, like not knowing all the answers can be kind of scary.
Absolutely. It challenges our usual way of navigating the world, right?
Big time.
But they suggest that this willingness to embrace the unknown, to be okay with not having all the answers, that's a crucial step toward experiencing truth.
It's like trusting that there's something bigger at play.
Yeah.
Some deeper intelligence that we don't always have to understand.
Exactly. It's about surrendering control, which can be really difficult for us.
Okay, so this brings me back to something they talked about earlier, the idea of a holy person. They were saying that even their understanding is limited, right?
Right.
So if even a holy person can't grasp the whole truth, how can we, with all our flaws and contradictions, ever hope to?
That's where the concept of satyam as an essence becomes really important.
Okay, remind me about that.
Remember how Bohm said a holy person is of the truth, like a drop of water from the ocean?
Right, they reflect the essence, but they're not the whole ocean.
Exactly. So it's not about becoming all-knowing, but about aligning ourselves with that essence, that fundamental truth that permeates everything.
So we're not trying to become these perfect, all-knowing beings, but rather to connect with that underlying truth that already exists within us.
Exactly. And they suggest that this alignment happens not through accumulating more and more knowledge,
Right.
but through cultivating a certain way of being, a way of seeing the world that's free from the distortions of Maya.
Okay, so how do we actually cultivate that way of being? They talked about meditation, but I'm still not clear on how it all fits together.
That's a great question. And it's one they explore in depth. Krishnamurti especially emphasizes meditation, but he's not talking about it in the way we typically think about it.
Right, he's not talking about, like, chanting mantras or trying to have some kind of out-of-body experience.
No, not at all. He describes meditation as a way of seeing things as they are, without the filter of our thoughts and desires.
So it's about cultivating a state of clear perception, of just being fully present without all the judgments and attachments.
Exactly. Instead of trying to empty our minds, which is often what people think of when they hear meditation,
Yeah.
it's more about observing our thoughts and feelings without getting tangled up in them.
Like watching clouds drift by.
Yes, without grabbing onto any particular cloud or judging its shape or color.
And this is where that concept of energy comes back in, right?
Exactly. Remember Bohm's idea that our confused consciousness generates this energy that keeps us trapped in the illusion?
Yes. It's like we're constantly throwing logs on the fire of our own confusion.
And meditation, as they describe it, is like cutting off the fuel supply.
Okay, I'm liking this analogy.
By learning to simply observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment,
Yeah.
we create space for that energy to dissipate.
So it's not about suppressing our thoughts, but about changing our relationship to them.
Precisely. It's about developing a sense of spaciousness within our own minds.
Mm-hmm.
A space where we can witness the arising and passing of thoughts and emotions without getting totally swept away by them.
It sounds like that kind of detachment could be incredibly freeing, but also pretty challenging to cultivate.
It is. It's a practice.
Yeah.
And they emphasize that it's not about adding another item to your to-do list
Right.
or striving for some kind of perfect meditative state.
Okay, so no pressure to become a Zen master overnight.
No, not at all. It's more about bringing that quality of attention, that mindful awareness to everything you do, even the most ordinary tasks.
So instead of trying to carve out this separate time for meditation, it's more about integrating this awareness into our everyday lives.
Exactly. They suggest starting with simple things, paying attention to your breath, noticing the sensations in your body,
Yeah.
really listening to the sounds around you.
So it's about waking up from that autopilot mode
Yes.
and becoming more present in each moment.
And they suggest that as you practice this kind of mindfulness, even in small ways, you'll start to notice some subtle but really profound shifts in your experience.
Like what kinds of shifts?
Well, for one, they say you'll start to see more clearly how your own mind creates your experience of reality.
You mean how we often mistake our own thoughts and perceptions for, like, objective truth?
Exactly. And as you become more aware of that process, you start to have more choice in how you respond to your experience.
Instead of just reacting automatically based on our old habits and patterns.
Exactly. You can pause, observe, and choose a more skillful response.
That makes me think of something they said earlier about knowledge not being enough. It seems like they're saying real understanding comes from this direct experience of seeing how our minds work.
That's a really insightful connection. They seem to be emphasizing that this direct experience, this art of seeing, is what's truly transformative.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all of this fits together. But I have to admit, a part of me is still skeptical. Can simply paying attention to our breath really lead to such a profound shift in our perception?
It's a fair question, and one they address head-on. They offer some really compelling insights into how this seemingly simple practice can lead to a radical change in how we experience reality.
This conversation is definitely challenging my assumptions. I'm eager to hear more about how this all unfolds. Okay, so we've talked about how meditation, this idea of being present, can help us break free from these, like, cycles of confusion and suffering. But I'm still a little hung up on how something as simple as, like, paying attention to my breath can really lead to some big, profound insights about truth and reality. It just seems too simple, I guess.
Yeah, no, I get it. I really do.
Yeah.
It took me a while to wrap my head around it, too.
Yeah.
It seems like the real power of meditation, at least the way Krishnamurti and Bohm are talking about it, is that it helps you create some space between you and your thoughts. Instead of being totally consumed by that constant chatter, you know?
Yeah, it's nonstop.
You start to step back and observe those thoughts as, you know, they come and go, like transient things.
So I'm not trying to make my mind go completely blank, like silence all thoughts.
No, not at all. That's practically impossible anyway. Yeah. It's more about shifting your relationship with those thoughts.
Okay.
You're not fighting them or clinging to them.
Yeah.
You're just acknowledging them, letting them be.
It's like I'm not the thought itself.
Right.
I'm the one observing the thought.
Exactly. It's a subtle shift, but it makes a huge difference.
Okay. So by creating that space, that sense of detachment, we start to see the truth of things more clearly.
That's the idea.
Okay.
By simply observing without that knee-jerk judgment,
Yeah.
you start to see how your thoughts, your feelings, they're actually shaping your whole perception of reality.
Wow.
And then you become aware of all the patterns, the habits,
Right.
the ways of thinking and behaving that are kind of keeping you stuck.
So it's like gaining insight into our own conditioning,
Mm,
right? All those habitual ways of thinking and reacting that we've picked up over time.
exactly. And that's how we start to unravel Maya, to see through those
I'm
illusions.
starting to get this. So by seeing our own conditioning, we're also seeing how it's creating this like veil of illusion.
Precisely. Our conditioned minds all tangled up in those habits, those reactive patterns.
Yeah.
That's what's constantly creating and recreating Maya, keeping us trapped in that limited view.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how does meditation, this practice of being present, how does that help us see beyond those mental constructs?
It's like you're slowly peeling away the layers of the onion,
Right.
revealing what's underneath.
So we're not erasing our conditioning, but we're becoming aware of it.
Exactly. And that awareness gives you a choice.
A choice.
Yeah, you're no longer just automatically reacting based on those old patterns. You can see them, you can acknowledge them, and you can choose to respond differently.
So meditation is not about escaping reality, but actually about seeing it more clearly.
Yes. And what's even more interesting is that they don't think this process has to take years of, isolated practice.
That's good to hear.
They believe that this kind of mindfulness, it can be cultivated in everyday life.
So I don't have to go live in a cave in the Himalayas to experience this.
No, not at all. It's about bringing that same quality of awareness to everything you do.
Okay.
Whether you're, eating your breakfast, walking to work, having a conversation.
Yeah.
It's about being fully present, right here, right now.
So it's not about what we're doing, but how we're doing it.
Exactly. It's a real shift in perspective.
It sounds like it. But also one that could have some seriously positive ripple effects.
Oh, absolutely. They believe that as we cultivate this awareness, we naturally become more compassionate, more understanding, not just toward ourselves, but toward everyone around us.
So it's not just about personal growth.
No.
It's also about creating a more peaceful, more harmonious world.
That's the beautiful thing about it. You can't really separate the two.
It's like our inner transformation is reflected in how we interact with the world around us.
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so powerful.
I know, right? We've covered so much ground. It's amazing.
It really is. From the nature of truth and reality to this whole idea of meditation,
Yeah.
the interconnectedness of everything.
And it all ties together. It's not just a bunch of random concepts.
Yeah.
It's a coherent worldview.
It is. And they're giving us these practical tools, these insights. We can actually use them to change our lives.
It's like a call to action, but a really gentle one.
Right. They're not forcing anything on us. They're just showing us the possibilities.
This conversation has definitely given me a lot to think about, that's for sure.
Me too. I'm curious to know what's resonating most with you after all of this.
I think for me, it's that idea that truth isn't something out there that we have to, go searching for. It's something we can access right here, right now.
Within ourselves.
Exactly. By simply being present, by paying attention.
That's such a beautiful insight.
It is, and it's really empowering, too.
It is. Absolutely.
It means we have the power to transform our experience,
We do.
to align ourselves with truth right here, right now.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think this deep dive has given us all a lot to ponder, a lot to practice.
To explore.
Yes.
A huge thank you to you for joining me on this journey.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening,
Yeah.
we hope you'll keep exploring these ideas, see where they lead you,
Absolutely.
discover that transformative power of seeing clearly for yourself.